welcome to How to Win the Lottery, Season 2, Episode 15, The Idiot by Elif Batuman. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
Shreds.
And this is the first of a two-part. We're bonusing up this season. Next episode, this was going to be the end. This was the finale. And then we're like, encore. One more.
Yeah.
Run it back. Because...
yeah, as Jim Morrison said, this is the end.
Our girl, Banana Karenina.
The Lizard King.
Our girl, Banana Karenina, wrote a sequel to this called Either Or, which we got. So it'll be out in 2 weeks on June 2.
We got it on the brooch. They sent it to us because they know that we're 30,000 strong. They know the promotional powerhouse of How to Win the Lottery. They know that you send your book to us gratis and you'll get 30,000 sales in response. You'll be a New York Times bestseller. And when this book shows up on the New York Times bestseller list, you know who's taking the credit?
Us?
Yeah, me more specifically.
Cool.
Even though you did all the work to get it.
So
a little behind the scenes here, guys. Joey does everything.
They know.
I
They know. It's come up a
nothing.
couple times on the show. You program it. And I do want to say that because we're extending this, and we also might extend it by another book based on a thing we're going to in real life tonight.
Yeah. To the homie Bud Smith's book release party.
And we are also adding one to next season. Next season is now going to carry us through the beginning of December.
Oh,
so,
Jesus Christ.
You know, it's May 8th right now as we record this. Mother's Day of God. And the next
happy
season
Mother's Day, Joey.
is going to has you as well. But here we are, campus novel, The Idiot. You were saying this reminds you of another book that we had read this season, but it's in structure, but a better book. Because you love this book.
The Idiot is 1/4 of the structure of Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld. So with Either Or being sophomore year of our protagonist, Selin?
I don't know. Selin.
Selin. The Idiot is exclusively Selin's first freshman year at Harvard.
Yes.
So the way that Prep is structured, we go section by section. We go through her entire 4 years at a prep school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. So the first two books of what I'm presuming is a series. As far as I know, there's no news that there's going to be a third book or a fourth book. But it feels like it would feel weird to go like the first two and then shut off after sophomore year.
So The Idiot came out in March of 2017, so 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it will be fun to, she goes every 5 years, 2032 will be completing her
why not?
Degree in Harvard.
There's a thing right now that's very, very popular called autofiction, which is...
about cars.
Yeah. Lightning McQueen and whatnot.
Ka-chow and whatnot.
Mater.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the Larry the Cable Guy plays Mater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a terrible character.
Why?
It's cliches. And all of, basically, Cars 2 is Mater as James Bond. That's real.
That sounds awesome. I didn't see any of them, so I don't
First one's pretty good.
I don't watch movies for children.
Third one's pretty good. Second one's not good.
I don't watch movies that are for children. So no animated movies for me. Because cartoons are for children.
Okay. Shred's taking a real hardline stance on animation.
Yeah. That's for babies. So in the literary world right now, something that's really popular is autofiction, which is kind of autobiographical fiction that like sort of takes a hard line of realism where it's like describing specifically like the events of a person's day or a person's life. And
that's not what I thought you were meant. Okay.
Did you think auto was like automatic?
No, I thought you meant like autobiographical as in like, because this, like real life, like a couple other books this season have been basically the author's experience, sort of fictionalized.
Well, yeah, sure.
But you mean specifically like whether that's true or not, it's like the day in the life of a character.
Yeah, but I think it is probably close to the person's life. I mean, I know because I read a little bit about Elif Batuman that she does seem to be writing specifically about her life.
Yep.
But autofiction seems to be something that's like incredibly popular right now, at least in literary circles, if not like, like Barnes and Noble or whatever. Where I think this book transcends that because I'm actually not that wild about autofiction. There's like this guy.
You keep picking it though.
Karl Ove Nosgrad. Guard? I don't know.
I've seen that name.
Yeah, sure. He wrote like 7 volumes of a book called My Struggle. And that's
Oh.
like, his childhood and his like through to his current day, I think. I haven't read it.
Okay. Okay.
But it's like, really like the sort of thing that people are seem very up on. Like, it's very like award-winning type book. What I think differentiates this book from those kinds of books, not necessarily the Nosgard book, because I haven't read that. What I think differentiates this book from those kinds of books is that it's doing a sort of parallel thing where it's telling one story that is very much like a Bildungsroman. We have the main character, Selin's growing up through the lens of being a freshman at Harvard. And then the other thing that this book is doing is that it's also viewing her through the lens of the classes that she's taking. So this book leans really hard on linguistics and semiotics. So you have the free play of signs and signifiers sort of representing this other duller, because it is like, in a sense, kind of a boring book. Would you say that that's accurate?
What I was saying to you as I was reading it, and I know that once again, I'm wondering, and I don't want to derail us too much. You keep finding these books that are about language, and I'm wondering if every book is about language, or you're just drawn to these somehow.
I think that's a possibility. I think also a possibility is that because you're aware of the way in which the academic mode with which I think about these things, that when you start looking at it, then you're also looking at language the way that, like, because our conversations often turn to these points, so you're looking for what's going to become pivot points in the conversation.
And I don't remember which specific, but I know other books this season, I have said to you, I think, like, specifically End Zone, I'm like, I don't think it's about language. Like, I think it's explicitly about language. Like, stuff like that. Like, I see other things in that. This, I think it's hard to not see that, because it's, like, literally, she's taking classes about it. I think in terms of, like, the dull, you said, was dull the word you used?
Boring. I think it's, like, consciously boring, because I think, honestly, the life of college freshmen are boring.
I think Selin's also frustrated, because I think she's frustrated that she feels like the titular idiot, in a way.
Yeah.
I think that she is frustrated in love and with her family to a certain extent, and with her friends and her roommates and everything. It's just like, this all kind of sucks. And I don't think that the book is boring. I think the narrative is kind of boring, which is not a negative.
That's what I was saying. You will have recognized over the course of how this is the 25th episode, right?
Something like that.
It's the 25th book. The 26th book, because we added in
Devil House. We've been doing this for like a year.
Yeah. You will have recognized that I am not only resistant to the categorization of boring as a pejorative, but also like embracing of boring as a theme, because I like things that move slowly, defy climax, resist expectations. And I think this
eschew endings.
Yeah, and I think this book does all those things, not only because it is leading us to sophomore year, so any ending we know is a temporary ending, right?
Also, the ending of this book is such a non-ending. Like, the last lines of this book: when I got back to school in the fall, I changed my major from linguistics and didn't take any more classes in the philosophy or psychology of language. They let me down. I hadn't learned what I had wanted to about how language worked. I hadn't learned anything at all. So basically, like, she spends a year of her life, like, I didn't get anything I wanted that. Like, time to start again, basically.
Right, which is an explicitly postmodern phrasing, right? Because language will inevitably disappoint you, because language has to fall short of reality, because you're using other people's signs and signifiers to interpret your own personal version of things. So it's like you can, any interpretation is going to fall short of reality, because other people are not dealing with the same language that you are. You have to, like, come to a middle ground where you share something. So when she's talking about language disappointing her, it's like, that's the inevitability of language. Language has to be disappointing because it can't live up to reality.
So I think what this book is about, to bring it back to, sort of a plot summary, is that it's split into two parts. And I think when you think of a campus novel, I'm thinking fall semester, spring semester, but it's not. It's basically school year and summer. And the summer is her mostly, I think, right? And the summer is her in Hungary as an English teacher in a small village.
Yeah.
I think that so that's it's just her at school learning stuff and meeting people and reading books and whatever in the fall and the spring in the school year, and then her going with some people that she kind of knows or meets or gets to know over there or whatever. Also, kind of following this guy Ivan over. We'll talk about Ivan because Ivan sucks. It's her experience over there, and I think that one of the real distinctions, like lines in the sand this book draws, is that she's going to school with ostensibly these people that she has so much in common with, but like language kind of like lets her down in certain ways, and then she gets over there and like it's much more frustrating, but they're actually able to communicate. And like there's a line at the end where she's talking to some kid, and like it's like touching in a way. She's said something like, you know, he said a couple things to me in English, and I realized that those were all things that I taught him how to say. It's just like that's a weird kind of like power and like importance and stuff. So again, like language, literally language barriers.
Well, okay, so let's talk about I told you beforehand that I had forgotten the name of this theory that exists within the book. But it's something like the
Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, Sapir-WHORF, which said that the language you spoke affected how you processed reality. We learned that it was wrong. Whorf, a fire inspector, they always called him a fire inspector, believed that Hopi people perceived time differently than we did because their verbs didn't have tenses. He said Hopis didn't see 2 days as 2 different things, but rather as one thing that happened twice. It turned out that he was somehow wrong about that, about the Hopis. And then Chomskyans viewed the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis as the vilest slander, not just incorrect, but hateful, like saying that different races had different IQs, because all languages were equally complex and identically expressive of reality. Differences in grammar couldn't possibly correspond to different ways of thinking. In my heart, Selin narrates, I knew that Whorf was right. I knew I thought differently in Turkish and in English, not because thought and language were the same, but because different languages forced you to think about different things. Turkish, for example, had a suffix, -mis with some kind of character, mish, which you put on verbs to report anything you didn't witness personally. You were always stating your degree of subjectivity. You were always thinking about it every time you open your mouth.
Selin believes fully that the language that you think in or that you speak in almost creates the reality that you exist in. So when she speaks English and this other kid speaks Hungarian, which she doesn't speak, or she only comes to learn toward the end, they're existing in essentially 2 different worlds. Their realities are completely different. Right. So his using language that she taught him means that they can step into the same world and exist at the same time, because the only thing that determines reality is communicability. Mm-hmm. Right. So like, yeah, that is a fascinating way to get towards at the end of the book.
And it's also mirrored in the first half when she's an ESL teacher and she's teaching English like this guy who only speaks Spanish.
Yeah, the Papa Liz Blanco. That's like, that made me laugh so hard.
And they create a language that's neither English nor Spanish, and no one understands except for them. And like, it doesn't matter. Like, they can communicate, but like,
and he's like really satisfied with like when she's like, the paper is white, and he's like, the papel
is blanco. Got it.
And she's just like, sure, yeah, that works.
Yeah, so it's good. Like, it's just the biggest frustration in her life, I think, is this guy Ivan, who I thought for a while was 2 different Ivans. Am I dumb, or does it make it seem, because like she has this like deep sort of semi-profound, or at least profound for a college freshman, email correspondence with this guy. This also takes place in the 90s.
Yeah, which is significant because email is yet another new method of communication, creating an entirely separate reality. So they have a dual relationship, a relationship that exists on 2 different planes of reality, one that exists in writing and one that exists in person.
And even in their writing, I think they're writing in both English and like Russian, and so like there's another layer there anyway.
Right. Yeah, they share Russian class and they're learning. She's an American who speaks Turkish because she was raised there. She's raised in America, but her family's Turkish.
From New Jersey,
from New Jersey, which a lot of we can talk about this. So many of these books have protagonists from New Jersey that go elsewhere.
I do feel, and maybe it's just the Mark Maronification of it all, but it feels like because he's from New Jersey, he finds out on his podcast that so many people are, like, New Jersey is just like a starting point for
people
like
leave.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of Los Angeles.
Sure,
like nobody's from Los Angeles. Everybody lives in Los Angeles. Nobody lives in New Jersey, but everybody's from New Jersey.
Yeah.
But so she is a American with a Turkish family, so she speaks both English and Turkish. He is a Hungarian who is in America to study math. He speaks Hungarian and English, and they both share Russian. So they're all existing in 3 different worlds, right? 4 different worlds, because you consider that they exist in person, where they speak in English and Russian, and they exist on the internet as well, where they speak English and Russian, but through writing, which is much, much different.
Yeah.
So that she's trying to like thread all of these different realities together to make sense of this person who is essentially completely opaque.
Yeah. She has this email correspondence with Ivan, but then when they have class together, he just completely ignores her. And meanwhile, in Russian class, they're reading, like, as they learn Russian,
Yeah.
they're reading progressively more complicated stories.
Well, they're reading a single story that gets progressively more
Right.
complicated because chapter by chapter it uses more cases.
Which is cool. I like that idea.
That's a great. I mean, I think that's probably the fantastic way to teach languages. I don't know anything about teaching languages. I speak one language and speak it. The rules and stuff of grammar, I still am not like an expert at. Like, I couldn't tell you what like nominative, accusative, dative case. I can't explain all that stuff to people. I've had to teach stuff like that before, and it's always something that I have to like look at in the moment and explain it. And then like later on, if someone asks me, I'm just like, I don't really know. I have to go back to the material. Right. So like that stuff is all very, very difficult for me.
So in this text that they're reading in Russian, the main girl, what's the character's name? Irina or something?
I think it was something with an N.
Oh, Irina was a Russian person who comes to their class. Anyway, in the novel, in the story that they're reading, the protagonist sees two different people, the same name, but they're different people.
Right.
And I'm like, are there two Ivans that she thinks she's emailing the one Ivan? There's a different Ivan because she just like, has like the Rolodex or like the white yellow pages or whatever of the school, and she like types in his name like Ivan. It's like, oh, here's the Ivan. I'm emailing this guy. And so like I was like, oh, it's a different person. There's gonna be like some switcheroo.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But no, it's just that he's kind of a dick.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the thing later where like, maybe I misinterpreted this, but like he was doing this as like a social experiment. Do you remember that passage?
He was like talking to her as a social experiment. That seems like what he's doing anyway. Like the whole, like he doesn't seem, he seems like he wants their conversations to exist on a plane, on like a theoretical plane.
Because they go back to each other's like dorm rooms and they go on like all these ostensibly dates and they never kiss. Like they're constantly in romantic situations where like you think something's going to happen. Like they don't even, and like he kind of gets pervy in ways like, oh, you should take off your dress. You should change. You should do, like, you don't want to have a way.
Yeah. He sort of like, presses her to drink when she doesn't really want to.
And so he's really kind of gross in that way, but like I feel like, and I'm trying to find the highlight here, that he did this all because he has at least one, if not two, girlfriends in the text that isn't Selin.
Eunice, yeah.
And I remember seeing something about like how he was doing it as like an experiment to like see how she would react.
Yeah.
Which is really scummy if I understood it right.
Well, I think I don't think he's thinking of it as being scummy. I think he's thinking of it as like, this is an interesting person that I want to experiment with. And I'm not I mean, I think Ivan is trash. I think he's a really terrible character. And he also, to his quote unquote credit, I guess, a little bit, he never really does make a move on her. He never tries to sleep with her or kiss her or anything like that, which like is an interesting thing to happen in the book because it's another one of those things where it's building up the expectation and leading you towards a sort of climax that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
And it feels very, very, very realistic in so far as the Selin's anticipation of sex and her relationship with Ivan result in almost like counterintuitive pain, right? Like when he like touches her hand, she loves him. She says that she loves him. She tells him she loves him. When he touches her hand, she feels she doesn't feel excited by it. She feels like a real horror. She feels like dread. And that dread probably exists in a place where she's like not ready to physically commit to any kind of relationship and knows that it's going to go badly or knows that he can only disappoint her. You'd think that she would be excited at his touch. And like I have memories of that sort of shit too. Like when I was like 14, 15, whatever, even later on when you're just like, oh, this is something that I want. But then if it starts to happen, you're just like, oh shit, no, I guess I don't want that. And you feel like your body you don't know how, your body is not giving you the reaction that you think your brain would want from something.
Right.
And I never really seen that captured in a book before this way. Sort of this. I think Batuman really, really captures the terror of adolescent. I mean, Selin is a little bit older than you'd expect for this story to be.
It seems like a high school thing as opposed to a college thing, right? But she also does seem not. She seems extremely naive to the world. Like she is the idiot, right? Like she just doesn't know things, and that's not like in a bad way. Like she's not like dumb. She's just inexperienced.
Yeah, the idiot, it should be said, is she's using the title of a Dostoevsky novel titled "The Idiot," in which the idiot is someone who has epilepsy.
So the book is titled after a Dostoevsky book. Batuman's Twitter is Banana Karenina, and this is basically, our friend Egg was saying that like it's essentially very similar to Anna Karenina in terms of the, I guess, narrative structure potentially.
Like her relationship to
I don't know.
Ivan is similar to Vronsky. I'm not that familiar with Anna Karenina,
because there was a thing that I sent you that there's a quote. My mother was rereading Anna Karenina. She said that Anna Karenina was about how there are two kinds of men who liked women, Vronsky, Oblonsky, men who didn't really like women, Levin. Vronsky made Anna feel good about herself at first because he loved women so much, but he didn't love her in particular enough, so she had to kill herself. Levin, by contrast, was awkward, boring, kind of a pain, more interested in agriculture than in Kitty, but in fact he was a more reliable partner because in the bottom of his heart he didn't really like women. So Anna made the wrong choice and Kitty made the right choice. That's what my mother thought Anna Karenina was about.
Okay.
And I feel like that comes in this novel, in The Idiot, when we're learning about Ivan, but we're also learning about Ralph, who is like her high school friend. And I don't know that he shows any interest in her whatsoever, but he seems much more of like an appealing, suitable partner or whatever, and she just completely bypasses that altogether.
We talk about his handsomeness pretty frequently,
and
and there is some suggestion that he might be gay, I guess.
He gets mad when somebody accuses him of being gay, I think, right? Or something like that.
I think Ivan suggests it, and he gets a little bit offended by it.
I was like, because clearly it seems Ivan shows no interest towards Selin romantically, but she's still infatuated with him. And I'm like, it's just the wrong man. And I liked that at the end when she's in Turkey, I think, like the very end when she goes home for a little bit at the end, there's another dude who comes up to her and just like is treating the same way that Ivan. She's just like, I'm out, man. Like I see what this is. Like I'm good. Yeah. So she grows and just like, I don't know what I want, but I know what I don't want. And based on Ivan, I know that this is not good for me, which I was like proud of her growth there.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think that Ivan is not romantically interested in her, but he's interested in her being romantically interested in him. Right? Yeah. It's like a power thing, right? Yeah. He likes having someone who's infatuated with him. He likes having someone that he can make feel bad. He likes having someone that
he likes having power over her, right?
Yeah, they have that conversation where they're like, okay, they're essentially playing truth or dare without the dare part, but they're like asking each other questions. And as the conversation gets more and more painful for her, he seems to be enjoying it more and more. Like he likes the idea that that he can hurt her.
And it just feels like everything he does makes her feel bad, either directly or indirectly. Like he'll tell a joke and he'll laugh and she's like, I don't get it. And he's like, yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, he also bullies her over stupid things like that thing where he's like, strawberries grow in trees. And she's just like, they don't. They grow in bushes. And he's like, no, stop being stupid. Strawberries grow in trees. And she's like, okay. And he's like, why are you so easy to convince?
Yeah.
Like he's essentially just like bullying her into agreeing with him. And then when she does, he belittles her for it.
Terrible. Even though she like pushes back like twice. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah, he's also significantly older than she is. He's like 24 and she's 18.
Because he's about to graduate. He's at the end. He's either going to go to Berkeley or like whatever. Like,
maybe he's only 21. Maybe he's not 24.
But he's old. Like, you know, and
he's a senior.
As you know, I'm sure, as a blank job title, the difference between like 18-year-olds and like 21-year-olds is immense.
Massive. It's like when you you remember when you were a senior in high school and then the freshmen come in and you're just like, oh my god, they look like babies.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so funny because college freshmen are similar, right? Some college freshmen just look like children, right? Mm-hmm. But then like people who are about to graduate college like seem kind of like adults.
Yep. Can we talk about Svetlana? Because I think I love Svetlana, but I also think
she's great.
She's very annoying, but I think it's annoying in a fun way.
I think she's great.
So Svetlana's just a friend that she meets in Russian class who just basically won't shut up. Like whenever she's like on screen, quote unquote on screen, she's talking, and it's a delight.
But they have a great relationship because it feels like they're always talking about things that legitimately matter to them. Svetlana is a good intellectual foil for Selin because they care about the same things, and there's like an interplay of ideas between them in a way that they move toward making sense, right? As opposed to Selin's interplay with Ivan, which just makes their relationship more and more opaque. Every time they have an exchange, she understands their relationship less. Right, it becomes something that is more and more confusing. Whereas with Svetlana, they're like working together toward a truth rather than working together toward a confusion.
And also they have different goals. Like Svetlana's just like, here's everything that you might want to or not want to know about me. And Ivan's just like, I'm not going to tell you anything about anything. Like he's like a wall and she's like literally an open book.
Yeah, and Svetlana and Selin are both like sexually inexperienced. They are like essentially at the exact same parts in their lives, with the exception of Svetlana is a survivor of war, right? She came to America from Belgrade.
I don't remember.
I think she's Yugoslavian.
Here is the quote from before that I was trying to find. This is a Svetlana thing. I've been wanting to try and experiment a game. It would never have worked with someone different than someone like me, but you, and this also goes into the Svetlana Selin thing, but you're so disconnected from truth. You were so ready to jump into a reality the two of you made up just through language. Naturally, it made him want to see how far he could go. You went further and further, and then something went wrong. It couldn't continue in the same way. It had to develop into something else, into sex or something else, but for some reason it didn't. The experiment didn't work, but by now you're so far from all the landmarks, you're just drifting in space.
Yeah, there's a thing, I don't know, again, this is, I've already read the sequel to this book, so there might be like some confusion for me in between which is which, but I think there's a bit where Svetlana talks about how she is an incredibly strong, and this is also why Selin and Svetlana can't live together, right? She is an incredibly strong personality. Selin is an incredibly strong personality, and she feels like they would be competing if they were together. Svetlana seeks out people who are stable and who will like
ground her,
yeah, and sort of like exist within her worldview, so that everything in her life becomes more stable, whereas Selin is looking for people to destabilize her. She's looking for a world that like, she's looking for interesting people.
Bust out of her bubble.
The people that show up at a party and they take over everything, and she like is interested in those people, whereas Svetlana is the opposite of that.
Even though by comparison, I think Svetlana is much closer to that than Selin is, right?
Much closer to the person that comes in and takes over.
Yeah.
No, exactly. But that's why. That's
why
why she's not seeking out those people, because those people have stronger personalities than she does. Whereas Selin is seeking out people who do have stronger personalities than she does, so that she can, essentially go on adventures and become a different person than who she is. And Ivan is that kind of person. Ivan does seem like, seems in a lot of ways like the smartest person in the room. There's no real evidence to us of that, but like...
Well, he carries himself. He comports himself as though he is.
Exactly, yeah. Which is like, when you're in college, it's kind of what's important, especially when you're a senior talking to freshmen. Like, they already assume that you're a mathematics major at Harvard. They assume that you're like a genius already.
I think there's something funny that we just came off the instructions, which, I'm going to look up, because I started rereading the instructions very slowly.
Couldn't be different books.
I know that, but there's something similar to a certain extent that, like, through the first 70 pages of the instructions, right? Like 35 characters through 70 pages.
Yeah.
And this, I was like, because off the instructions, because you're like, this guy, Ben, she's this, and this is this, and this is, I'm just like, I remember names, but I don't remember associates. So I would like want to be much more thorough. So like now with this, I'm like, okay, not going to make the same mistake twice. Going to write everything down. And I'm writing all these character names down, and they never come back.
Yeah, Hannah, like her roommate Hannah is barely in it at all. Angela is not in it really at all, right?
And there's a line later in the book, about maybe 3/4 of the way through the book, where Selin just like being in Hungary felt increasingly like reading War and Peace. New characters came up every 5 minutes with their unusual names and distinctive locutions, and you had to pay attention to them for a time, even though you might never see them again for the whole rest of the book. I'm just like, yeah, you just described the previous 300 pages. I'm just like, all these people are important. I'm going to remember all of them. And then I'm like, it happened like 3 times. I'm like, who's Ralph? Oh, I remember Ralph now. Got it. But like, almost everyone else is just like
But it's also like, look, let's play like connective tissue here, because this is, if something that this book tells us is that like, literature reflects life and life reflects literature, right? She's always like talking about these books, and these books are like her entire life story is written in these things. You're also talking about the Book of Wall right now, right?
And
the ways in which you have over the years...
Do we want to explain the Book of Wall?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Like, over the years, we've had a group chat. Like, how many years has this group chat gone on for? I've been in it for 4 years.
I've been in it for probably at least 9 or 10. Basically, since we all got iPhones and like you could just easily drop in, drop out of a thread, there's been like a few. It's changed a few times, but like there's basically been like a 10-year-long thread that like on a busy day we'll see thousands of texts back and forth.
And a third of this group, fully a third, right, is people from the same town in high school,
the same graduating class, basically.
Same graduating class. Well,
close.
Yeah, Andy was like a freshman when I was a senior, I think, and like. Matt and Dylan are a grade below. Anyway,
this is the dumbest and funniest thing. Please keep going.
But over the course of years and years and years, we'll just tell stories from high school or from like there are people that come up, like girls we had crushes on or teachers, or especially now that the teacher stuff is getting really dramatic because there's like a scandal in our hometown. And there are all of these recurring characters. But like by this point, there are probably thousands of them, right? There are so many characters.
And the way that you guys talk about it, it's just like, oh yeah, and like, you know, like Selin or whatever. And like, you know, remember Selin, like just talking about Selin, like we all know Selin, and like literally only a third of us do. But because I've only deleted, I think, like one thread, and that was by accident, I couldn't recover it. I called up, I'm like, I need this back. Like, it's too late. I'm just like, oh no, history's gone. If I search a name in my phone, it's almost a guarantee that someone has talked about them at length at some other time. And these are all people that I have never met, will probably never meet, but they all exist as fully fleshed out characters in your narrative, which has also become part of my narrative.
Right.
Secondhand.
Right.
It's insane.
You can provide context for these people that like we'll mention someone will be like, oh, so-and-so, like we'll say like a teacher's name. We will have forgotten that 4 years earlier we had a different conversation about that teacher. And the thing from 4 years earlier very well might correspond directly. Like you might be able to trace a line of personality or of consequence directly from one of those things to the other. And like because there are multiple grades and different friend groups, because I had a friend group that entirely was not these kids in high school, but they like know them tangentially because we went to the same high school. Dylan and Matt had friend groups that had nothing to do with me, right? Andy obviously had to completely like these are all intersecting parts that like tell a much, much, much broader story of an entire town during
a 4 or 5 year window.
During a 4 or 5 year window, which is still going on because now we can check in with these characters and they're 20 years older than they were then.
Yep.
And it's like, here's what's going on with these characters now. And it's very novelistic and very like strange.
So I've been joking for literally years I should start writing the Book of Wall, which is just an oral telling of this 4 or 5 year stretch of these people in this community and the way that they interact with each other. But like, there's no practical use to that. That's not of any value to anyone other than 5 of us.
Well, it would also be interesting to see what contradictions there were within that.
Sure.
Because you have different perspectives and you have people who are telling stories, but they're telling stories in order to be funny. So certain things are exaggerated, characters are changed, events are slightly tweaked to maximize the potential of the story. So like all of this stuff is fascinating, but it is like our narrative exists within the context of this group thread pieced together over a decade.
Yeah. And just like stories that are out of context, but are just reminded like, oh, I saw this person at the grocery store the other day. They ever tell you about blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's incredible.
It's like an epic novel.
Yeah. That nobody would ever want to read.
No, but that's the thing is that I think that like,
and I don't say that's a bad thing because like it's of immense interest to a very select group of people. But I feel like if any, I mean, I guess you kind of have to know, but like if any of the people that we talk about, not even maliciously, but just like bringing up 20 years later, and by we, I mean you, and I'm just listening, I'm just like, I don't know who any of these people are, that they are the subject of a conversation between 12 people, most of whom they've never met. It also makes you wonder, like, are other group threads talking about you?
They absolutely are. That's like, this is the way that the world works now, that we're so like interconnected and that we have all of these places to put our stories.
Yeah.
Like it's no longer just people telling stories and those stories disappear because you're, either said them out loud or you had nowhere to put them over all those years. Now there are places to put them and there are blogs and there are
podcasts,
social media, and all of these things that, like, you know, I sometimes, like, on when I had Facebook, it would be like, here's a memory from 7 years ago, and I would just be like, oh shit, like, that is wild, because that was 7 years ago, and that's something that happened. So, like, I think, getting back to the book, I think that she's doing the same sort of postmodern assembling of a story, giving us a singular perspective of all of these characters over a significant length of time. I mean, in this case, not a significant length of time, but over 1 year. But as like the Selin narrative goes further, it might go 4 years. It might go 10 years. You might get Selin out of college. I don't know.
Because in real life, Elif Batuman, author of 2 books, now I guess 3.
3, The Possessed. She's got the book it's a nonfiction book about people who love Russian literature.
Staff writer for The New Yorker, born in New York City of Turkish parents, raised in New Jersey, graduated from Harvard, got her doctorate in comparative literature from Stanford. So Selin going to Stanford next.
Yeah, maybe.
You never know.
Well, there's also this idea that, which I try to resist in fiction outside of Philip Roth, who I think does it well.
Okay, Gurian.
This idea of author as protagonist, which Selin is like, she's a writer. Right, she's like wants to write down all these stories. She wins the contest.
Yep. Do we know what her story is about?
No, I don't think so.
Because she's like I have to read, but we don't hear her read. We don't see her published. She's just like relieved that it gets published, like mostly in like tiny text at the back of the magazine.
But it's very funny when she describes the other people's stories. She's like, one person's story is about how he has a butt for a head and things like that. And it's like, yeah, I remember those stories.
Well, this book, we should say, I don't know if we've been clear about it, is very funny. That like it's kind of slow, and I did not like it as much. I still really liked it, and I'm still looking very much forward to either or. I was wondering if there's going to be a book that we do that I like more than you do, because I don't think I've loved books, but I think every book that I've loved, every book we've read, I think you've enjoyed more.
Maybe End Zone.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that might be my favorite book, so that's probably. But
I think maybe I just like stuff more than you do.
Is that true?
Well, I don't think I don't think it's true for movies.
Positivity is kind of my brand.
Yeah, I think I like books more than you do.
Probably.
And just I don't know.
But so the reason I bring that up is because we were talking about, I'm like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more to it. Like, I think that as we were briefing, you were always ahead of me in the novel. So we were never actually talking about the book itself, because we
also try not to talk that much about the book itself, so that we can have this conversation.
Yeah, you have full-on conversations with Egg, and then just, come in here with your mind melds.
And I plagiarize her. She says a bunch of smart stuff, and I just steal it and use it on the podcast.
But, like, I was just like, I think it's very funny. Like, every couple of pages I laugh out loud, but I kind of wish that there was more. And then I'm like, then she goes hungry, and it kind of, like, I find that, like, less appealing, especially because I think we're in, like, the campus mindset. But, like, I think the hungry stuff is super effective in hammering home the points she's making, the themes that she's doing.
Yeah, it also alienates her from
right. It really
English,
puts the language
right?
thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also, like, the summer being the end of the book, and it being this thing where it's like she's going all over the place, and she's like very much disconnected from Harvard. Like, it is structured, but it is also kind of like, fuck whatever structure you thought was happening with this book. We're doing something completely different.
Because also you're like, okay, part 2 is going to be Europe. Like, there's going to be her as this, teacher of a small village. And then, like, the first, like, third of that is, like, 2 days or whatever, or a couple days or whatever, she spends in Paris. I'm just like, wait, hold on.
Well, also, when you say part 2, I think this is a 425-page book. It implies that 200 something pages are in Hungary, which is not the case.
Right.
Like, it's only 100 pages,
well, that's what I'm saying,
maybe
like,
75 pages.
Like, if the book is kind of bisected almost exactly in half, part 1, part 2, and part 1 is Harvard and part 2 is Europe, but like a third of Europe is Paris and a third of Europe is Hungary, and a third of Paris.
It's half. Like, only half of it is Harvard. I thought, like, easy. Like, I thought it was 3/4 Harvard and 1/4.
Part 2, she's at the airport.
Huh. I totally thought that the majority of the book was at Harvard, and it was just like a quarter of it.
Maybe it's 250 and 200, but like the part 2 is like almost exactly in the middle. Also, in the Harvard of it all, she stays in Matthews Hall, which is the same place that David Faderman and the Matthews Marauders stay in Loner, which I was just like, what?
She and Svetlana are cooler than those dudes, though.
Yeah.
Well, Svetlana's not in Matthews, right? Svetlana is somewhere else. But yeah, she's cooler than...
Although you can... one of the first funny things in this book is when her roommate just like, go buy... I bought this refrigerator, you can use it if you buy it as a poster. And she's like, okay, sure. Like, what should I buy a poster of? She's like, I don't know, something college-y. What, like something, just get Albert Einstein. And she gets an Einstein poster.
But she very clearly wants Selin to get the Einstein poster where he's got his tongue sticking out, right? Which is the poster and she doesn't do that. She gets like a different Einstein poster where he's just like writing on a chalkboard or something.
And everyone is just like so disgusted by her choice in posters. She's like, I didn't even want to buy the poster. And that's why I was saying, like, I don't want to whitewash this book because that's a problem in Hollywood. But the way that she just gets so flustered by just, I didn't even want to get involved with this poster. Don't blame me for the poster. It's just a very Dylan Galula, actress, podcaster, wonderful person we both love. That just like, I can see her just getting like, I didn't want, this isn't, stop it. I don't care. And so I was just picturing her, and I know that, you know, she's a different ethnicity, but
yeah, that was the first part of the book that really made me laugh hard.
Because like every few pages, I would say, like every 3 or 4 pages, like I would laugh out loud, which is hard.
So, in so much as I think of this as being a comedy, right? A comedy that like has like a sadness in it, but a comedy nonetheless.
I asked what kind of poster she had in mind. Psychedelic, she said. Listen, leave me out of this, I said. It's not really my poster. It's a complicated situation. And like the poster's there, the entire like they reference the posters, like walking by the poster and just like frustrating, right? So
Dylan bought that poster that was like a sailor kissing a woman in World War II.
Yeah.
We had that poster in our dorm room, but like it was kind of ironic. I guess we also had a Beavis and Butthead poster.
But like it's ironic to you, but like anybody who comes in just like, oh yeah, okay.
Right, yeah, which is kind of why it was funny to us, I guess. It's hard to explain.
Well, like it's just like the John Belushi college one.
Yeah, all those college students with their Jim Belushi posters. Their World According to Jim 1 sheets. They're About Last Night posters.
Hey, man. You never know.
No, I like Jim Belushi, man. He's great in Show Me a Hero.
So, okay. What I thought was funny, and I think we talk about this in different books this season in particular, where it's about like a character like reflecting back to the time in college or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That she's writing this seemingly after the fact.
Yeah.
But she's writing it as though it's in present tense. Like, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going, blah, blah, blah.
Well, she's also journaling very heavily.
Right. This is probably not correct, but I feel like the only time that she, like, refers to something with hindsight is talking about the Awesome Blossom appetizer, which I thought was very funny because, like, Ivan and Selin go out or whatever, and they go to this restaurant, and then with hindsight,
she's like,
she's just like,
it's been discontinued.
The only thing that she applies knowledge to after the fact is about a goddamn chain appetizer.
Did you ever have an Awesome Blossom?
I've had the Bloomin' Onion, which is, you know...
Same thing,
different chain.
Yeah.
But it was so funny that, like, the entire narrative is about how this character knows nothing. Ostensibly, the woman, whether you're thinking as Elif or, like, grown-up Selin or whatever, is like, I'm wiser, I'm more composed, I know more, I could add context, and she never does that.
The only thing that gets context is the Awesome Blossom.
It's the funniest thing.
Yeah. I don't fuck with onions, so I've never had an Awesome Blossom before.
It's just fried food or whatever, but like it's the dipping sauce that's like that's, you know.
I guess so. I wouldn't go near that thing.
I also want to say I wrote down, hell yeah, math as a language.
Yeah, right.
Which is pretty cool. Which I feel like, considering how many times we've talked about language this season in particular, math never comes up.
And that you're a math dork, too. You are. Yeah. When I needed someone to help me study for a test that I had to take, I Zoomed Joey and I made him teach me how to multiply and divide fractions.
It worked.
And he did, and I learned, and the next day I took the test, and I passed it, and then it immediately left my head, and I haven't thought about fractions since. But Joey had a perfect score on his math SATs, right?
Yep. And every time our friend Charlie would go into a room with me, he would introduce me as, this guy got a perfect score on his math SATs. I'm like, that's not... Sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's how you want to introduce me.
You shouldn't be ashamed of it.
I'm not ashamed of it. I'm just like, there's so much more to me than that, but sure. I also, I'm just scrolling through my notes, I like that they explain very timely about why we don't call it the Ukraine and just Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, which is, that's important.
Because Ukraine means borderland, and
Yeah.
so just calling it the borderland is diminutive, but like borderland is just like, it's a place, but like the borderland is just like, ooh, it's not really a place.
Because it defines it in relationship to specifically Russia, which is offensive.
Yeah.
It
Takes agency away from it, basically, right? Also, her, like, there's a big chunk of this book dedicated to, like, her learning about life and teaching English via the Beatles, and it seems like she does not give a shit about the Beatles, and she doesn't approve the Beatles, she does not like the Beatles, but, like, they're all just, like, all these, like...
Oh, actually, it made me laugh, because she's teaching the via the Beatles. We have a friend who's getting married in Greece, and I'm going there with my friend Dylan, and we got a little card that said, like, he gave us a card that had, like, a bunch of Greek phrases on it, and one of them is Yasu, and Yasu means, I hope that I'm getting this right.
Yasu Leach?
Yasu means hello, but Yasu also means goodbye. And Dylan, the first Dylan who used to teach English to Japanese children, and I assume maybe did it via the Beatles, the first thing that he said when he looked at it was like, this makes the Beatles song really confusing. Like, you say Yasu, I say Yasu.
Yeah.
So, like, that was interesting to me because Dylan is someone who has taught English in foreign programs before, and the first thing he said when he picked up a like card about foreign languages was like, this makes the Beatles confusing.
Well, also, I think in this novel somewhere they talk about a language where hello and goodbye are the same word. Like, it happens here too. Like, it's not just Greek. It's like, unless we're talking about Greek here. They also talk about, for a moment, which I have never seen in writing because I think it was like a failed experiment,
Esperanto.
But Esperanto, which the only time I hear about it now is when Paul F. Tompkins brings it up on Comedy Bang Bang as just like this like failed thing or whatever. But for
it's a huge plot point in a Tony Kushner play, but go ahead.
For seemingly a season about like language, when Esperanto is like the universal language, it has words from every language, but they're like, well, there's only like 2 Hungarian words or whatever, right? Like they're not exactly flattering. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. The other thing that I want to say is that, like, I think there's something incredibly valuable while you're looking this up about, she brings a couple novels, like dense, weighty tomes with her to Hungary, and like after days of just speaking broken English and like sort of like frustrating interactions, she's like, I'm craving like language, like I'm craving English in a way that like only like Dracula can provide me right now.
Right.
That she's escaping to these novels that are like hundreds of years old or 100 years old or whatever, because like no one around her is able to speak to her the way that she like, her brain needs to understand English.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a fascinating thing to think about.
Yeah, for sure. I have this thing that Svetlana is saying. Svetlana said that I thought of myself as a robot who could only act negatively. She said I had cynical ideas about language. Quote, you think language is an end in itself. You don't believe it stands for anything. No, it's not that you don't believe, it's that you don't care. For you, language itself is a self-sufficient system. Selin says, but it is a self-sufficient system. And Svetlana says, do you see what you're saying? This is how you get yourself involved with the devil incarnate. Ivan sensed this attitude in you. He's cynical in the same way you are, only more so because of math. It's like you said, math is a language that started out so abstract, more abstract than words, and then suddenly it turned out to be the most real, the most physical thing that there was. With math, they built the atomic bomb. Suddenly this abstract language is leaving third-degree burns in your skin. Now there's this special language that can control everything and manipulate everything. And if you're the elite who speaks it, you can control everything.
Yeah.
Right? That's like a very, very important point, because like something that when you brought up math, I wanted to hit on this very specific idea that the book talks about, which is that math and math formulas existed before they knew that those math formulas corresponded directly to many of the things that they describe in the world, right? So it's almost as if the creation of math created the correspondence rather than those things, rather than discovering math, right? There's this idea, like, you know how people say that, like, oh, Thomas or whatever fucking discovered electricity. Like, Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity with the key and the kite. It's like he didn't
invent it,
right? It was always there. Like, yeah, that's what I was trying to say. He invented electricity, but like they're saying, like, it's almost like fatalistic, right? Like the creation of math created the corresponding nature, created like a correspondence between nature and the language of mathematics, which then impacted the physical reality of the world. The same way that the language that the same way that language drives systemic power structures, right? Like if you're interviewing for a job and you say ax instead of ask, they might roll their eyes at you, right? Even though like that has African American English vernacular has as complex and as complex grammatical rules and as dense a history as standard written English or whatever.
Yeah.
But the people who control that language impact the world and the physical reality of that world in a very, very real way. The same way that Svetlana is talking about the impact of math.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Her classes, other characters, or should we get to Egg's email?
Let's do Egg's email. She'll probably cue some things up for me.
We have an email address, lottery@cageclub.me, if you want to write in Meg's reaction to The Idiot. While this was not my favorite book of the semester, which was probably Secret History, with the instructions as either a tie or a very, very close second, I enjoyed this book for the most part. I was pretty much completely uninterested in Ivan, aside from Selin's initial weird email, which I thought was hilarious, but I liked that Selin's desire for him was not erotic at all. I wish we could have had that email she wrote to him when she was mad. It was as if Selin was hiding it from the reader because she didn't want the readers to think too badly of Ivan, like how you never complained about all the bad things an ex did to your friends because they won't forgive the ex if you ever get back together with them.
That's a good point, yeah.
I listened to this as an audiobook. I actually think I might have found it funnier if I read it instead of listened. It was read by elif batuman, and at times I got distracted by the way she was reading instead of the content of the book itself. She gave a light girlish tone to Selin that I would not have given her if I had given Selin a voice in my head. I liked Selin a lot, and she reminded me of the friends I had my freshman year. I found myself wanting to hop in the book and give her advice to stop talking to Ivan. He's a weirdo, and you can do so much better than him. Clearly, he's not going to break up with his girlfriend for you, and do you really want to date or be with someone who's going to cheat? If he cheats with you, he will cheat on you.
Okay. The book doesn't really go into like infidelity stuff all that much, really.
It's kind of almost completely devoid of sexuality.
Yeah.
Although at the end, when Svetlana's like writing her a note, she's like, I wish I could tell you about this dream about these like orgiastic nuns and the clowns or whatever, but like I ran out of room, so sorry.
Well, Svetlana is much more open about sexuality, about wanting to experience sexual things and stuff like that.
But like Selin's not.
Well, her
that's not, I mean, thrust at least, no pun intended.
Her desire is much more abstract. I mean, she has those bodily desires, but they're more like they're less directly pointed, and she does seem to feel erotic magnetism to Ivan, specifically around ideas of power and around ideas of him being cruel to her, which is interesting. Like I'm interested in the lack of politics in this book. Not that there like is like a lack of there's never a lack of politics.
Are you talking like actual politics or like politics as metaphor for relationships or something?
I mean both. Like
okay.
I'd be interested in a feminist reading of this book because Selin, Svetlana, they seem completely devoid of feminist ideas, which I think partially is a result of the time, right? As a result of the 1990s, and people really only. I mean, I'm sure, feminism in college and stuff like that was obviously has been around for quite a long time, but I feel like now people are politicized at such a young age, and young women going to Harvard are going to be politicized through feminism in the 90s by like reading texts about feminism and things like that, and she's not there yet. We might get there later on. But
I think and this isn't exactly what you said, but it made me think that like there's a decided lack of like tying this to current events. Like it exists in a very specific place and time and location, and I think if I can remember, the only thing that like ties it to, other than just like computers are new, I don't know either a cable is, do I hang myself with it or whatever, is like at the end when she's in Turkey and she's like, oh yeah, a bomb went off in Atlanta and nobody got, and things are fine now or whatever.
Oh, because it's 96, right?
Right.
This is a 95, 96 book.
Yes. But like other than that, like, because you have, and I feel like I think it's good because I think it sort of makes it more timeless in a way, other than like email is weird, right? Or like looking people up on servers or whatever, which doesn't happen anymore. I think that there's like you could be like, oh, and like the president isn't blah, blah, blah. Or like there's like a whole like real world, like a stable of history you could tie to, and she just doesn't.
Well, I think because like that's accurate, right? Because
sure.
Like when I don't know that it's accurate anymore. Right now, the college students that I interact with are not necessarily politically conscious of things like policy or anything like that, or theory or anything, but they have divided themselves into different, like I have Republican students and I have Democrat students, and they will snipe at each other and be angry at each other for whatever. Like I have students wearing "Let's Go Brandon" shirts in class and things like that.
That's just like what's happened to society because of
I know
social media or whatever,
that's
right?
what I'm saying. I think that in the 90s you had political students, but I went to college in post 9/11, so we had conversation about that. But it's like politics were not entire identities of people. And they didn't make up a vast majority of our conversations.
They still aren't. It's just people like want them to be.
Yeah. And I think like part of it is, that part of that is I'm assuming because I'm relatively safe demographic wise. Policies were never really threatening me in any way. But myself and the people that I talk to, if I polled all of the people that I went to college with and spent a lot of time with, my guess is half of them would be Republican, half of them would be Democrats, or probably like with some skewed version of like a portion of the people are further left than Democrats, a portion of the people are further right than Republicans. But there are people that like at the time I didn't know what any of their politics were. I knew that there were people
because it wasn't a defining characteristic the way it is now, where it's like your Twitter bio is like Trump 2024 or Stop the Steal. It's just like, what?
Yeah, right. It's like not that many people were like riding hard for John Kerry.
Well, understandable.
A number of people were like, and I was one of them, and who were like, "Fuck George Bush." Like that was there was like that, but it was still like it wasn't like "fuck George Bush" didn't make its way into every conversation,
right?
The way that it kind of feels like it does now.
The way that maybe it should have back then.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not. Sure.
Meg says, I really like the scene in the beginning when people were complaining about Selin's Einstein poster, because to me, Einstein seems like such a benign person. I didn't realize there was a point in time where people were anti-Einstein. It's
a standout scene. We've all enjoyed that scene.
It reminded me of when Neil deGrasse Tyson got called out during the Me Too movement, and his response to it made him seem even worse than the allegations. Now most people have forgotten about all that, and he's back in the collective consciousness as quirky scientist.
Yeah, I hate Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Actually, the stars in the Titanic film are not... It would not be...
Yeah.
The thing I want to spend the most time on is the end. The last line about Selin changing her major from linguistics because she didn't learn what she wanted to was kind of interesting. I didn't like it at first. I really didn't like it at first. But I kept rolling it around in my head. This book really hit the nail on the head about how I think about language. I only know English, so read the following with a grain of salt. In every language, there are different shades of meaning. You can spend entire papers or classes debating on what the author meant. When you have a translation, it's the translator making a decision on what the author was saying and relating that in another language, like an elaborate game of telephone. Perhaps if you'd read the original text, you would have used different words to convey the meaning. And then, is the translation closer to the original when the translator's a native speaker of the original language or a native English speaker? A speaker of the original language may not have the scope of vocabulary as a native English speaker, and a native English speaker may lose some of the shades of meaning within the original text. That's why the translation team of Richard Pevier and Larissa Volokonsky, come on, Egg, is so interesting. He's a native English speaker and she's a native Russian speaker, and together they work on translating in a way that gets as close to the original as possible.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Within translation, there are nuances lost or changed every time. For example, there are some people who say that Virgin of the Virgin Mary is a mistranslation.
Sure.
It was originally supposed to mean something closer to young girl.
Yeah.
If the translation was wrong or different from the original, then the foundation of many different religions is based on a misconception. To go back to the final line of the book, it kind of seems like Selin wanted there to be a truth, with a capital T, that comes from learning communication, but that's not true or how life works. In my opinion, if there's a capital single truth to be learned or figured out, there would be no point of communication at all. All in all, I liked it, and I look forward to reading the sequel. Well, thank you, Egg.
Yeah, I think that's my dad was a language professor, language teacher, and he was very, very specific about this idea that translations are betrayals, that in translating a text you lose something essential to the meaning because of this idea, because of this. I think because of the non-Chomsky theory that language
Well, this is the Sapir-Whorf thing, right?
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
the whole
That each individual language creates its own particular reality, whether that be through something like gendering a chair, or whether it be through creating words for stuff that we just don't have in English. So you have to make hybrid words that mean something else, or different cases. And trying to translate those things, you lose meaning. And then as you get for, like, when Egg was talking about the Torah or the Bible,
you're probably not the Torah.
No, but the Torah is older even, and has been translated like over and over and over again, and the Bible's been translated from ancient Greek, Aramaic to Latin to English to and
the New King James Version.
Yeah, and a lot of these are not based on. A lot of these are translations of translations of translations, right? So you end up with this thing that warps potentially incredibly important moral decisions that people have based their entire lives on.
Sure.
And it becomes incredibly confusing. So yeah, I think if each translation then splinters a reality, especially if you're thinking about something like a biblical text, something that has influenced so many lives and so many people, if each different translation creates a new reality where those people are morally reacting to that translation, you have, once again, this idea of competing realities. So you have this thing that we have, right now, that is maybe like the premier problem with our at least American society, which is that you have a large group of people who just can't agree on what's real. There's no like central idea of truth. It's just like everything that is true can be dismantled because of the source. Mm-hmm. And
that's something that people are actively working to try to resolve. And I don't know that, like, it's not going to get better.
I don't think it is. I think it's going to get more bifurcated. And mm-hmm. this is the essential failing of language, right? Because it can't, because it can't convey truth purely. It can only convey pieces of truth.
Mm-hmm. Alternative facts.
Right.
There can't be alternative. Like, by definition, a fact is indisputable.
Yeah, but we dispute them, right?
Who did you think of for casting for this novel?
Oh, I
have 3, and I've said at least 1. But who do you have?
The entire season has been near impossible.
It's tough because of the
age of the characters. So I didn't really think of it. Yeah.
Aside from whitewashing, can you see Dylan Galula as Selin or not really?
Sure. Yeah.
For Ivan, I had probably been cast in like 80% of our things. Adam Driver.
Too old, but yeah.
Sure. Everybody's too old.
Yeah, I mean, he's like 40, though.
No, he's not.
He's like my age.
I think we probably look this up all the time. He's 38. God damn, he's going to be 39 in November.
Yeah.
22.
Yeah, these people are too old.
Find an Adam Driver type.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then for Ralph, the only person I casted was... Well, I was saying that I think for Svetlana, I was picturing a math tutor from my writing center.
Oh, I 100% thought that you were going to pick Florence Pugh just because she's doing the accents in the Marvel movies.
I would love to put her in it. Absolutely, let's cast her. I don't think of Marvel as like a foundational place to cast people from, but
yeah, no. Even though they're
I feel like Marvel's
sucking up all the fucking talent.
Marvel's losing me. I think just too much. No more stuff. But Ralph, I have Jacob Elordi from Euphoria.
Yeah, you love that guy.
I don't love that guy.
Yeah, you do.
Do you know who that is?
Yeah, you have like a. Wait, is this true or is this not true? I think that this is true in my head. Oh, you can say whether or not it's true.
Oh boy.
Don't you have like a Nate Blogspot fan thing? Aren't you a guy that like created a Nate Tumblr with like all these pictures of Jacob Elordi like in a towel and like all of his different fuck scenes on that show? And like you like have been practicing his looks in the mirror and stuff? Well, you hear it here. He's not denying it. He's not denying that he has a Nate Blogspot fan page.
All I can say is keep reading.
You've got one of those Twitter pages that like wishes celebrities a happy birthday.
Jacob Elordi updates.
Yeah, you're like a Jacob Elordi #1 stan. He should be with
Maddie.
I don't know. I don't really.
You've lost the narrative.
Maddie is Alexa.
Alexa Demi.
Yeah, she's great, man.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
That show was filled with talented people.
Yeah.
I know you do not
if
like
only Sam Levinson were talented, then it would be a better show. Today's crime is Sam Levinson running a show.
At Lottery Pod on Twitter.
I'm an idiot, fucking oblivion, John Didion, Pacific Ocean blue. He wrecks me like you do, wreck me like you do.
Don't be willed to be my lover. I can be your Danny Glover. I got food inside my cupboard. We can both be rediscovered.
I just wanna